Hey guys, welcome back to The Well with Shan, and I'm so pleased today to have with us Becky Griggs. I knew her as Becky Cordes. Now she's Becky Griggs, married and a mom. And our topic today is going to be postpartum depression. And Becky is going to be speaking to us about that topic. But before we get there, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and what life looks like outside of momming.
Outside of momming. Well, right now I am a Montessori preschool teacher. I work with 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And I have been married to an amazing man for, 8 years. We just celebrated our 8-year wedding anniversary.
Awesome.
I'm doing online school and parenting, and we have a full plate right now.
Oh.
It's good. It's really good, but it's full. So,
yeah. And I know you're trying to balance all of that. Quick fun fact. Has your husband told you that he and his mother and brother used to babysit my 2 younger children?
Yes.
Back in the day.
Yes.
They have fun stories. Anthony's great.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
He's so awesome. Yeah.
That's so great. And you have a degree in social work?
Exceptional education.
Exceptional education.
Yeah.
All right. And that's what's fueling this possible certification in Montessori teaching.
Yeah, I love teaching in any capacity, really. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's so great. Well, and you're a Spanish speaker?
Yes.
Yeah, you've got lots of gifts. So I like to share all that because that gives us a little picture of pre-motherhood.
Yeah.
Some of the picture of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of give us a feel as we're starting to walk into this topic of getting pregnant, those 9 months, just kind of the pre kind of thing. Did you ever struggle with depression prior to getting pregnant?
I had struggled with depression and anxiety before getting pregnant. It was always, I always felt like it was manageable though. I saw a counselor while I was in college, and I felt like between diet and exercise and my relationship with the Lord, there were things that I could do where I could manage it. Mm-hmm. After having a baby, that was a different story.
Whole different ball game. Not so manageable.
Yeah.
All right. So there was some of that there.
Yeah.
But it never felt paralyzing. It never felt like it shut you down.
No.
You could keep going and be okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And what were your thoughts in going toward getting pregnant and those 9 months toward motherhood?
Okay, so let me start by saying before we got pregnant with my son Juan, we actually got pregnant. It was about almost exactly 3 months before I got pregnant with Juan. I got pregnant, and we lost the baby like 2 months. About 2 months after.
So 8-10 weeks.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to the doctor's office, and I was like, we had found out we were pregnant. We were so excited. And I just the entire time I was waiting for that first doctor's appointment, I just had so much joy. When I got pregnant, it was like I could see all the things like 50 years in advance of the Christmases and the birthdays and all these things and the timeline, and like, oh, he'll be this age when at Christmas time, and we can do this and get him this kind of things, and I thought all of these things, and my very first doctor's appointment, and I went, and you know, they told me, yes, you are pregnant for sure, and I had told them, I was like, well, I just have a few questions I've been spotting, and you know, can you tell me a little bit more about that? When does that supposed to end? And they said, we think actually just the amount of spotting that you're telling us is happening, we should go ahead and do an ultrasound. And so we did the ultrasound, and that very first appointment, and I could tell right away that something was wrong because they weren't saying anything, and then they said they needed to get the doctor, and then she told me that I might need to brace myself for a miscarriage. They couldn't tell me for sure, but it didn't look good, and so I got in the car and called my husband and my mom, and I was just bawling, and like a week later we lost the baby, and that was really hard. It was really hard, like physically and emotionally, that when I felt physical pain, I knew it was because I was losing the baby. It was really hard. God was with me though, and that's like the thread and the whole story is like He was with me, and He allowed suffering, but He was with me, and that's kind of like the overall theme of just from start to present, this theme of like Him knitting my heart to His, and like every day depending on Him. Every day I needed Him. I couldn't make it one day without Him. And so that was right before we got pregnant with Juan.
And do you think you were still grieving then? That even though you got pregnant again, there was still this loss, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what happened was, I didn't know that we could get pregnant so quickly. I had no idea. It took us a while to get pregnant the first time, and so the thought never even occurred to me that we could get pregnant again so soon. And so 3 months after we got pregnant with Juan, and I remember like the feeling was different, because when I first got pregnant with Juan, like there wasn't the same joy. Like instead of joy, it was fear. And I told myself, like, I'm not even gonna like let myself think that I'm pregnant until like I see his heartbeat and hear his heartbeat. And when I see that, then I will let myself feel joy. But when I saw his heartbeat and I heard his heartbeat, like I still felt fear. Like it was like I knew how easy it was to lose a baby and how real that was. And after losing the first baby, I remember talking to so many other people that brought me comfort and hope, but that had shared their story, and I started realizing how common it was and how many women go through miscarriages. I had no idea that I had no idea of the numbers. And I felt this constant fear. And I knew of people that had lost their babies later in pregnancy, and so this fear was always hanging over me. And that was when my struggle with anxiety started amping up. I started having panic attacks when I was around 6 months pregnant. I would wake up in the middle of the night and couldn't go back to sleep. I was just paralyzed with fear. I would wake Anthony up like, I'm not going to be okay if something happens to the baby. I'm not okay, and struggling to breathe, like all of these things. And that whole pregnancy was marked with fear. I remember like having baby showers and not taking the gifts out of the bags because I was thinking I'm gonna have to return it. And it was
mercy. So even to that degree, feeling like if you got a gift, the thought was, I'm gonna have to return this gift.
And it was, in some ways it was like fear, like, yes, there is still a possibility of this happening, but like the fear and anxiety got out of control. I couldn't manage it. I mean, I would talk to people, but it was like, an outsider looking in, it didn't make sense. Like, you're healthy, your baby is healthy, like your ultrasounds are healthy, but I couldn't internalize it because it was like I hadn't fully recovered from the first loss.
Yes.
And I wonder if like I had like almost like a postpartum from my first that got carried into the second like pregnancy. And
that's a great point because grief and depression are really close cousins. I mean, they can look a lot alike, and so maybe that was what was happening there for you.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this part of your story, but that had been building, and those emotional waves were coming through the entire pregnancy.
Yeah.
For you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of the theme of the pregnancy with Juan, even though, like, at doctor's appointments, he was a healthy baby. His position was good. Like, his numbers looked good. He was chunky. Like, they kept telling me, he's a big baby. You're gonna have a big baby. But everything looked good. But I couldn't squash my fear.
Yeah.
All of that didn't squash it. Up until like the night before, one or two nights before he was born, I remember turning in the middle of the night, and I had this horrible pain. I was a few days past my due date, and I felt this pain so bad I couldn't breathe. And I woke Anthony up, and I was like, I'm scared. I couldn't get deep breaths in, and I couldn't feel him move. And so I called my midwife's after hours line, and someone called me back and said, okay, you got to give yourself like, I forget the time, it was like 2 hours. You want to feel 10 kicks in 2 hours. He could just be sleeping right now. And so like those 2 hours felt horrifically long.
Yeah.
But we felt 10 movements in 2 hours. They said, we think he's okay, but come in at first thing in the morning and we'll get you an ultrasound. So I came in the morning. I'm like maybe 4 or 5 days past my due date, and they were like, your amniotic fluid is really low, and your baby's really big. We think that we should induce you, which is not what I wanted, but I felt like they were, for the both of us, the baby and I, felt like they were trying to do the best thing. So we went ahead and did that.
Okay.
I was in labor for a total of like 23 hours.
Oh, mercy.
And around like towards the end of it, I started getting really sick. They had broken my water in hopes that it would help speed things up. I started getting a fever and vomiting, and within like an hour, I went from like no fever to like, it was like 102.9 or something fever. And I started vomiting, and they said, we don't think you're strong enough to push the baby out. It had been like I said, like 23 hours at this point. We had tried to get epidural around like maybe 20 hours into the labor, and it didn't work. They said around 10% of cases the epidural won't work. So we tried the epidural, it didn't work. I don't know what it's like to be in labor without Pitocin, but Pitocin was rough. It was rough.
Oh, that's what they say.
It was rough with no like pain management. And around 23 hours, I finally was like, okay. I think the thing that pushed me over the edge, they said, you're really sick, you could have an infection. If you have an infection, it could spread to the baby and it could be bad. Okay. And so I said, okay. I surrendered.
To do whatever.
I surrendered to that, even though I really did not want a C-section. And so we went into the operating room to have a C-section, and they took about 45 minutes to get the epidural in. They said I had pregnancy scoliosis, which I don't know if is an official term or just like my spine was like compressed from carrying a huge baby for 9 months, and they had like 12 epidural attempts, 12 failed attempts to get the epidural in. And because I was having a C-section, they had to give me some, they had to get the pain, like find a way to mask the pain somehow. Anyways, so we have the C-section. Juan is born. Have this like really sweet moment that I remember. Anthony, after they wrapped Juan up, they gave him to Anthony, and Anthony brought him over to me to look at me so I could see him, and he brought him like really close to my face, and Juan like stuck out his tongue and like licked my nose.
Oh,
it was really sweet.
It's precious.
Yeah, that was like, it was such a sweet moment. And then after that, they took Juan to the NICU to try to take care of him, make sure he was okay. And then all I remember after that was like my blood pressure started bottoming out. I remember looking over at this screen, and it was like 53/35.
Whoa.
Like this nurse ran and got something and came over and like stabbed me in the leg with something, and I was coming in and out of consciousness. Had a friend with me that while Anthony was taking the baby, and I was like, months afterwards, I was like, was I seeing something crazy, or are those numbers right? She was like, no, those numbers were right. So recovery from that was a little bit traumatic, but
and do you have answers around why you got so sick and why your blood pressure bottomed out, and you don't know what happened right there?
No, I know very little. I went back at some point and asked my midwife for like if she could give me any kind of paperwork on like if they do like, I'm sure that they do like notes or something. If she could give me that so I could just find out what happened. And that was when I read like so and so attempted the epidural at this spot and this spot and it failed. So and so then attempted the epidural at this spot and this spot and it failed. And I was able to like count 12. In my head, I had told Anthony, I was like, it was at least 10. I was like, it was at least 10 attempts.
Which is anxiety producing in and of itself.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah, it was rough, and I was also really dehydrated from throwing up, and they couldn't let me drink anything. And I remember this moment of like when I was like sitting over, and they were trying to put the epidural in, and it was taking so long to get the epidural in, and I kept asking for water. I was like, please give me water, and they're like, we can't, we're so sorry. And I had this moment of like Jesus, like, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at your face right now, because it felt, everything I was feeling was awful. Like the stabs from the epidural is not pleasant, and then the dehydration was not pleasant, and the pain was not pleasant. All the things.
Yes.
But I had this moment of like, Jesus, I'm looking at you. And I felt like I can pinpoint that moment so clear of like I don't know. It made me think of like how thirsty Jesus was on the cross. So I guess all that to say, the birth was not great. But Juan was healthy and fine, and that was beautiful. So my body took a beating, but he was okay. Praise God.
It did indeed. But you had not just suffered a kind of a physical beating, but there had been quite an emotional beating for months.
Yeah.
Prior to his birth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of hope and expectation that like once he was born and I could see him, that like that was gonna go away. But what ended up happening is I started having trouble sleeping, and right away, immediately, I started having trouble sleeping. I guess I shouldn't even say trouble sleeping. Right away following his birth, I stopped sleeping.
Whoa. Completely stopped.
I completely stopped sleeping. I went 4 days straight without sleeping, not 2 minutes, and nothing.
Wow.
And we thought initially that it was anxiety. It was all anxiety because I was having panic attacks and major anxiety. And I was having intrusive thoughts. I was having horrific thoughts. And it made sense that it was all anxiety related. What I know now that I didn't know the first like 18 months that he was alive is that the pregnancy caused a neurological sleep disorder. So it's called periodic limb movement disorder, where as I'm entering the first REM stage of sleep, my body will do a movement and it'll wake me back up. So I never get to sleep.
Yes. And can you say the name of that again?
Periodic limb movement disorder. It's a cousin to restless legs, which people are really familiar with.
Yes.
That. A lot of people with restless legs have like a little bit of periodic limb movement disorder, and a lot of people with periodic limb movement disorder have a little bit of restless legs. I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was I couldn't sleep. The second night, for Juan's 2-day doctor's appointment, I talked to his pediatrician about it. Again, we thought it was mostly anxiety. I was like, I think it's because I'm worried about his breathing. I kept thinking that there was something wrong with his breathing, that something didn't sound right, and I was just fearful. She listened to him. She was like, I think he's fine. I don't hear anything. I would try to take like video recordings of his breathing, and I felt like I was hearing something that scared me, but no one else was hearing it. And I, to this day, still don't know if, because I spent more time with him, I would hear things, and I couldn't catch it exactly with the video, or if it was like just, I was so fearful. On
some kind of hyper alert.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. But the third night of no sleeping, I think it was the fourth night of no sleeping, I started crossing into this place of like, what's the best word for it? Where the sleep deprivation was starting to affect my sanity.
Reality started slipping.
I became severely suicidal and had made up in my mind, if I go one more night without sleep, like I could not do it. I said and that was after being up all night, like giving birth to Juan, like all of these things, and then I went 4 straight days of no sleep. I started losing it.
Understandably.
And I went to my midwife and I said, I'm not sleeping. I haven't slept in 4 days. And she was like, okay, let me prescribe you something. She was like, you're gonna get like 8 hours of sleep with this. Like, you're gonna feel great. So I took it that first. She was like, start with this dose, see if you can sleep with this dose. If you can't, then you can do this dose. So that first night I tried the first dose. I tried for like an hour and I couldn't sleep. Then I tried the second dose, and I fell asleep. I slept a total of an hour and a half, and I woke up and I could not get back to sleep.
So with the heavy dosage of sleep medicine, an hour and a half is all you got out of it?
Is all I got.
Wow.
And it's one of those medicines that I guess a lot of people are familiar with it. I was prescribed Ambien, which I really don't like. I don't like it. For some people, it has helped them a lot. For me, it was not what I needed. But no one knew at the time what was really going on.
Right.
The second night that I took it, I slept 2.5 hours. So I had been waiting from like when I took it at like maybe like 9 o'clock, fallen asleep at like 10, woke up at 11:30 at night. I had been waiting since 11:30 at night, the night before, to take this the second night, to take it like 9 or 10 o'clock at night and try to sleep, and I slept 2.5 hours. And I started losing sanity.
Yeah. When you say that, kind of describe for us what losing sanity looked like.
I started like doing things like self-harm. I had horrific intrusive thoughts. Some of them made sense, some of them did not make sense. I would, in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep, I would go into the living room and I would scream into a pillow and like pull out my hair.
So you literally feel like I'm coming out of my skin.
My brain was so tortured, it felt like a nightmare that I couldn't get out of.
Bless your heart.
And then I started sleeping like between like 3 and 5 hours a night. For the next 4 months I did that.
On the Ambien?
On the Ambien.
Okay.
In between those, I would go like maybe 24 hours without sleep, like where I would take it and it just wouldn't work. I wouldn't sleep that night. I might get 2 hours. I might go 48 hours without sleep. I did that for 4 months.
Wow.
And the entire time I was severely suicidal. I was having suicidal thoughts almost constantly. My like only drive to live at that moment was to like take care of my son. We went to our church and they recommended I see a counselor. So I started seeing a counselor at Lighthouse, the Lighthouse Counseling Center. And she was like, we need to get you to a doctor. Like, we need to, like, maybe like a psychiatrist. So the insurance that I had at the time was not great. I got an appointment with a psychiatrist. This was like 3.5 months after Juan was born. And it was like the worst experience ever.
Wow.
I went in with Anthony, told her what had been going on. She misdiagnosed me and was like, I'm not going to give you anything for sleep because I think it's this. Which, talking to other people later, they were like, there's no way it was that. It was for sure like anxiety and this periodic limb movement disorder. But anyways, she wouldn't give me anything for sleep, and I was like, I can't sleep on my own. I cannot sleep on my own. I was telling her that. Like, I try to nap when my baby naps. I can't nap. I would try, because the medicine, I would only sleep like 3 hours with it. I would take the first like couple hours of the night to try to sleep on my own, and then take the medicine at 1 a.m. so that I could sleep 3 hours and wake up. I could not fall asleep on my own, no matter how tired I was. And so I said, what happens if this doesn't work? What happens if I take this home and I go home and I don't sleep? She was like, well, you can come into the, what do you call it? Where like you have, they could admit me into the hospital. She was like, but you can't take your baby with you and your breast milk will probably dry up.
And she was that flat.
She was that flat.
It.
She was that flat with me about it.
Thanks for the help,
yeah.
lady.
And I had told her, like, I'm struggling with suicidal thoughts. Like, I had my baby with her. Like, I explained to her, it was awful. I came home from that appointment and I had no hope. And I decided that night, like, that I would kill myself. I decided I would.
Because you just didn't see how this was sustainable.
I couldn't go on the way that I was going on. I mean, I was harming myself regularly. I couldn't heal from not being able to sleep because I couldn't sleep. It was the amount of sleep that I was getting, like 3 to 5 hours with intermittent days of no sleep, was like, I couldn't handle it. On top of that, I had postpartum anxiety and depression.
Right.
So like, either of those things separately, like, would have rocked me, but like, that's together, right. I had no hope.
And if we could pause for just a moment, I don't know how many of our listeners are aware of this process, but I often tell my clients, like, you can take a perfectly healthy individual, no history of anxiety or depression, physically astute, and rob them of sleep, and right about that fourth night, third to fourth night, no matter who it is, will start hallucinating or experiencing significant psychological effects. But by day 7, the loss of reality into psychosis will happen for anybody. I mean, sleep is vital to, as you're saying, our sanity. So I just want to insert that this is a very complex scenario that you're describing, that sleep deprivation alone would have catapulted you into, much less all these other factors that you're describing, right? Yeah.
And so that is where I was. I know for sure I had had one hallucination, but like the intrusive thoughts and the pain in my head, it was awful. And so I had decided that night after seeing that doctor, like I had no hope. And now looking back, I see God's hand in all these different ways. But this was like a turning point where God intervened and was fighting on my behalf in ways that I didn't know. So that night, I wrote Anthony a suicide letter, and I came up with a plan of how to, in a way that he would be out of the house and I would get Juan to someone, that I was going to kill myself and I was going to leave him this note. And I wasn't going to do it that night because I needed to arrange a couple things first. That was my plan. And I was set. I was set on it. I didn't know how I could get better. I didn't know how, I wasn't thinking straight to think through, now, if I could have told myself, go see this person, go talk to this person, Like, neither Anthony or I knew. We didn't know. And he knew things were bad, but he didn't know quite how bad it was. As much as he was, like, present and, like, would do anything to help me. There's no way anyone could have known how bad.
Because it wasn't in your head.
Yeah. And there are certain things, like, I didn't exactly tell him. And so, he called my parents and was like, she's not doing good. And my dad called me that night, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something that gave me the message, like, hold on. And I held on one more night. I said, oh, hold on one more night, God. And I held on one more night.
Wow.
And my parents came to my house the next day. Sorry, I cry a lot.
It's okay.
And they brought me this brochure to a hospital in Michigan that takes women and their babies who have severe postpartum conditions. It was a Christian hospital.
And they had researched this?
No. My aunt lives in Michigan, had been asking for prayer for me the Sunday before this doctor's appointment. The Sunday before this happened, she had asked for prayer for me in her Sunday school room. A woman there was like, I think she needs to know about this. Gave her a brochure to this hospital that's in Michigan, 12 hours away.
Wow.
My aunt mailed that brochure to my parents that week, the week I had decided to kill myself. The next day, that night, God had told me to hold on one more night.
Oh, Becky.
The next day, they drove this brochure to my house and was like, we don't know if this will help, but we want you just to see it. And it was this hospital that takes women who have severe postpartum conditions, that has a nursery where you can take your baby with you. And they have like a nursery attendant that you can go and you get like, you see a psychiatrist, you have individual counseling, group counseling, you can come and stay as long as you need. You can do inpatient or outpatient, where like I would come for like 8 hours of the day and then I could go home. So we decided that day that we were gonna go. Then like I think it was like either 24 or 48 hours after that, we were like in the car on the way to Michigan. And we drove through the night. Juan slept through the night. I took my medicine in the car. Anthony drove. I think I slept 2 hours. But it was like I had this hope.
And at this point, are you piecing together what you just told us, like this is God's intervention, or
yes and no?
Were you not quite able to see that yet?
It was like I could see it, but I still had this like mountain of fear on my back. And I remember when I went there. And my aunt has this apartment on the side of her house that someone had just moved out of, that my husband and I and Juan were able to stay in. They were a 30-minute drive from this hospital. Like, the Lord worked things out in a way that I can only give him the glory and only give him the credit. Because I can pinpoint that time and say, that saved my life.
Yes.
That was Jesus. Like, nothing in my strength or my power or anything could have arranged that. Only Jesus could have done that. And so I went there and I met with the social worker who, like, where we did the paperwork, and she was like, I feel like you're just barely able to hope. And I was like, that's it. Like, I have been looking for hope this whole time. And the whole time, the whole 4 months, like, God would put people in my life of, like, to give me, like, a word or a song or a meal or a message from church that was, like, this piece, this string of, like, hope. Have hope. And I was like, I don't know how I can hold on to that right now. But I know that's what you're telling me, but I don't know how to hold on to it right now. But I had to, like, I had, like, I could only get through the day if I spent time with him. Like, I could only make it through one day at a time if, like, he gave me something to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she said that word hope, I was like, that's what he's been telling me this whole time. And I've been scared to hold on to hope because I've been scared that it's not going to work out and I'm not going to make it and I'm not going to be there for my son. And that was my whole fear the whole time. Was like, I wasn't worried about my life as much as, like, I didn't want him to grow up without a mom. And I was so sure that was going to be the case. And I felt so much fear. Like, at any moment I stopped sleeping, I remember telling a doctor, like, I can't go more than 48 hours without becoming so suicidal. Like, I can't go more than 48 hours without sleep. Like, that is my breaking point when I am getting this little tiny bits of sleep in between. Like, if it was sandwiched between 8 hours of sleep and 8 hours of sleep, I could survive 48 hours. I was like, but I can't go 48 hours when it's sandwiched between 2 hours of sleep and 3 hours of sleep. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't do it. And, so, anyway, so they got me and they were like, yes, for sure, we're going to take you. And, I remember that when I met with the psychiatrist, the first thing she said to me after, like, I had told her my story was, like, I'm worried that you're not sleeping, and we need to get you sleeping. And I felt this, like, weight come off my shoulders.
Finally, somebody gets it.
Yeah. And she was like, these other issues, the anxiety, the depression, we need to handle those, but the first thing we need to do is we need to get you sleeping.
Yes.
And I felt like this breath, like I could take a breath. And, they prescribed me something, and that night, I think I got 7 hours of sleep.
Oh.
And I woke up, and Juan was like, he was nursing, he was in this, like, sleep regression phase, he was waking up, like, 4 or 5 times a night, would not take a bottle. I woke up, it was either 4 or 5 times that night, but I was able to get back to sleep every single time. I got 7 hours of sleep, and I woke up, like, I felt like $1 million, like, oh my goodness. Like, I felt amazing.
Wow.
And then the second night, I got 8 hours of sleep. And it was like, all of a sudden, this hope. I was like, okay, I can hold on.
Yeah.
I can fight this. I can hold on. And I still had anxiety, and that was rough. I still had fear. I still had depression, and that was rough. But the sleep piece, getting sleep, I was able to tackle it in such a different way. And that process of like struggling with anxiety, that's something that I still wrestle with today. And I don't know, someone asked me recently, like, well, when does, like, postpartum depression end? And like, and that's like different for everyone. A lot of people think like 6 to 9 months or like a year, and I don't really know like when postpartum depression ended, because I've had this ongoing struggle with anxiety, and I have asked the Lord so many times, please take this from me, please take this from me, but I started asking, like, don't take it from me if I'm going to lose my intimacy with you.
Wow.
Because I had gotten to a point over those 4 months where it was like have you heard the analogy of like the shepherd that has the lamb that runs away, and he like breaks the lamb's leg and puts him around his neck while the lamb's leg is healing so that he learns to stay close to the shepherd? Like, I felt like that was what those 4 months were. Of like, he broke my leg, and I could not walk without him. I could not make it a day without him. Every day I was wrestling with suicidal thoughts, and this desire just to end it. This never-ending desire just to end it and end the suffering. But he kept giving me like a word. He kept giving me a song. He kept giving me somebody to speak into my life. And it knit me to him in a way that I was like, I don't want to lose this intimacy with you. Because if you allow this so that I could be intimate with you, then it's worth it. Because, like, feeling the presence of the Lord and seeing him come through, seeing his miracles, seeing him on a day-to-day basis, experiencing that presence, like, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. And I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it.
That's incredible to me that you can even say that. Because when I've gone through some periods like that, I don't know that I could say I'd do it all again, you know? And I think it's amazing that the intimacy that you have felt, you truly felt like it's been worth it.
I think it's one of those things that, like, it took me from being, like, someone that loved the Lord, but I didn't really need him. I was healthy. I was strong. I, like, used to run 5Ks. I ran a half marathon. I ate really healthy. I would juice, like, all of these things. I was strong.
So you felt pretty independent.
I was independent. Yeah. Like,
so this was your severe mercy, your journey from independence to
and so
close.
I guess in that of just like it is better for me to be broken in this world and know that I need a savior and walk with his presence and learn to hear his voice, because that was another thing, was that, like, I learned to hear his voice in a way I had never learned to hear his voice before. Things that became, like, not audible, but these echoes, these whispers, like,
and you knew it was him.
And I knew it was him. And it was like he knew how great my need was, and so he was giving them to me all the time.
Wow. Whew, that's beautiful.
And to this day, it is still like that. And I still struggle with anxiety and have these moments of, like, real fear. And when I listen to the voice of fear, I spiral down very dark very quickly. And you would, if you heard my thoughts when I'm in that place of fear and listening to that voice, you would say, this is not the same person as what I'm saying right now.
Sitting here before me.
Truly. Because it was like this, it is this choice over and over again of, like, do I let the spiral go down and listen to that voice, or do I, like, choose God's voice? And it's a day-to-day wrestle, because I struggle with intrusive thoughts on a day-to-day basis. I still have fears that something's going to happen to my son. I have fears that something's going to happen to my family. I deal with a lot of fear, and I think there's a lot of components to that. It is psychological, it is chemical, it is spiritual. I believe that the Lord has taught me there's a very real spiritual battle. Satan is real, and he attacks us. I believe that diet makes a difference. It's this huge picture of all these things. It's not just one thing, I've realized.
Can I ask you, while you're gathering your thoughts, so you are how many months now post birth?
Okay, Juan is 3.5.
3.5. Okay.
Yeah.
So you feel like, although the anxiety persists, the postpartum depression has lifted? Or do you feel like you're still there?
I would say that I can see, like, these timelines where, like, I took a huge step. Like, I took a big step at that 4-month mark. So
it feels like you're kind of, I don't want to say climbing, because in a lot of ways your story is you're being carried, but you're coming out of a pit, and it's having some markers that you see toward improvement.
I would say like I feel like it gets a little bit easier as time goes on, but a lot of that has had to do with like finding the right doctor, finding the right foods, trying to be healthy in all the ways that I can be healthy with sleep hygiene, and
you're doing a holistic on every level. Becky, I'm sure through this process you've met now and probably talked to many other moms who've gone through some form of postpartum depression. How does your story similar or different to the stories that you hear out there? I'm curious.
I would say that in the neurological sleep disorder is different, and that's not as common. But similar in that a lot of moms, especially with postpartum depression and anxiety, have sleep issues, significant and severe sleep issues, where their sleep is impacted, and they might have a child that isn't eating well or is colicky, and that impacts their sleep.
Right.
It might not be their body as much as it is having a newborn baby, or it could be anxiety. Like anxiety robs you of sleep in so many ways. And what I tell people is like,
speak a word to moms out there who might be going through this.
Sometimes I'll share my story and they're like, well, my sleep is bad, but not as bad as yours. And I'm like, bad sleep is bad sleep. Like, what the bad sleep that you're describing is bad sleep, and that is enough to rock you. And I would just say that, like, what you're going through is so hard. The anxiety and depression piece alone, that alone was so hard. And finding the right doctors and finding people makes a huge difference. And also, like, that we can't carry this alone. Like I needed Jesus in that moment. I need him every day, but he was the one that helped me.